Hear about disabled people finding success. Stories from Aotearoa's disabled community. Their journey, your voice, my future. My Rhythm, My Ride, a podcast by My Life, My Voice, hosted by Kylee Black. Good morning and welcome to My Rhythm, My Ride podcast by My Life, My Voice. I am Kylee Black and you are here today with the incredible Antnz Burgess, who is an amazing leader in our disability sector, has been involved in the Mid-Central EGL workshop space, leadership group space, involved in YAY's outdoor education, outdoor accessible opportunities, and more recently, the violence and prevention space, and so many other spaces that I've barely touched on, but I'm sure we're going to hear about some of those today. Welcome, Antnz. Welcome.
Kia ora, Kylie. So happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. We're going to cover a lot of ground today.
I'm really excited about it.
Fantastic.
So who is Antnz Burgess?
Who is Antnz Burgess? Wow, my name is actually Toni Burgess. The reason I go by Antnz is I'm quite small in stature. My uncle was a Toni, so it was kind of handy for me to be able to differentiate between the two of us. But mostly it's because when I was training to be an outdoor recreation instructor, I was 25 meters up a cliff. Someone said, "Hey, you look small like an ant," and kind of here we are 25 years later. The reason it is AntnzVentures, rather than just Antnz, is I was actually doing a outdoor first aid course, and there were two of us that nicknamed Antnz. I think I got the better end of the deal because we actually still call the other Antnz Antuck because he was from the UK.
So that's how it started.
Who am I? So Antnz, I'm a bit of an adventurer. I'm passionate about community development. I have whakapapa to Aotearoa nui a paparangi and Ngāti Te Whare Toa. I'm an outdoors nutcase, bit of a sports person, ecology. I did a diploma in adventure ecotourism because it was one of the only ecology components that, courses that had the ecology component. But at the heart, I found myself in an accident in these policy spaces, and I'm an outdoor recce at heart. I'd rather be out climbing a hill or rafting down a river, but I seem to have found myself in some pretty unique spaces to be able to push some of our community forward. So this is where I am.
How did you find yourself? So you've been involved in Mid-Central Enabling Good Lives Mid-Central Mana Whakaha trial. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I have been. Tell you about that. In 2016, I finished a certificate in exercise and sports performance. So 2017 kind of rolled around, and I was looking for something to do. If I'm not doing something, I have a tendency to get myself into trouble. So I saw a flyer come across about a system transformation and a public consultation. And my brain went, "Oh yeah, what's this bullshit government tick box consultation gonna be about this time around?"
Yeah.
And I turned up and I found 6 disabled people in their whānau. And they were actually saying, "You know what, the government has asked us to the table for a change." I have a family history of, I guess, standing up and asking the tough questions. So my question to those people was, well, does this see us have some form of mechanism to see something like the something like the American or Canadians with Disabilities Act? Pretty big question to dump on people. So they all kind of looked at each other and went, well, potentially in the long term, maybe. And can you put your hand up for leadership group, please?
You're good at asking the questions. You ask good questions.
Yeah. I'm the one that asks the hard questions often in a room that people have got sitting in the back of their mind, and don't know quite how to phrase it, or they'll be, I just come out with it quite often. I tend to call a spade, which can sometimes get through to people, but also when working in the policy space, I do have to be a bit more mindful about what I say sometimes.
Stepping into, you haven't always been involved in the disability circles, so this has been a new bit of a new space for you. How have you found yourself in these spaces?
Yeah, so it has definitely been a steep learning curve. I'd had to do a bit of personal self-advocacy to work my way into the outdoors industry. Even now, the outdoors industry can be quite risk adverse towards people with disability. So when I rocked up to the local polytech going, hey, you know what? Here I am on crutches and I want to do your outdoor ed course. There was a bit of pushback on that. And, a whole lot of decisions about my risk factors were made without even talking to me. So I ended up doing a level 2 recreation and tourism course, which was 6 months and pretty boring, to be fair, for me. So the Polytech could assess my risk before they put me onto the diploma of adventure ecotourism. And then I faced some of the similar barriers when I went to get certified with New Zealand Mountain Safety Council. So I've done a whole lot of fighting for myself, and that can be draining, especially when you don't have a full diagnosis to back up what you're saying. So to fight for other people, I just didn't have it in me. Whereas 2016, 17 rolled around and I was in a better space. People had said, hey, you've got these transferable skills. Do you want to put them to use? And I'm always a person for taking an opportunity when it presents itself. What I would say to people is make sure you look after yourself in the process. Set some boundaries really early on about how far you're going to push yourself for work, because if you don't set boundaries early on in this space, there's always more work to be done, and you'll find yourself on like a mouse wheel that just never stops. So that would be my one piece of advice to people.
Because you haven't, so before the new Mana Whakaha demonstration rolled around, correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't able to access the support funds to live your best life, and the new way changed that for you. But also, you're right, there's so much opportunity and so much work in this space. What has it been like to step onto EGL, and then what has it been like in a double one question, and what has it been like to be in that space and learn that balance?
Yeah, so the other thing that's tricky when you're disabled and you're working in this space is trying to make change for the whole and seeing the good happening in the big picture that has not filtered down to the workers on the ground yet. So people like the hospital workers not knowing about Enabling Good Lives, the clinicians not knowing, all those sorts of things. So that can be difficult, particularly when you've got a whole lot of your own disability stuff going on. And I found that out the hard way in 2019. I was working far more than I should have, probably wasn't recognizing my own mental health needs at the time. Received one of those letters from the DHB that was like, hey, we acknowledge you messed up, but you're not messed up enough for us to consider you a priority. And after working in an Enabling Good Lives way for 2.5, 3 years, I had a bit of a meltdown and I needed to take a break. So from that, I've learned to be far more careful about not overdoing my time and work, because if you get bogged down in the work, you forget about the holistic approach to your own life while you're trying to achieve that for the entire community. So sometimes it's really going back to the basics and going, actually, how do I put the Enabling Good Lives principles into action in my own life? How do I make this easy to use? What relationships do I need to build to make this a little bit easier? So I don't know whether that answered the question, Kylie.
We fight for others. It's a lot easier to fight for others than it is sometimes to fight for ourselves. It's
Definitely.
easier to advocate for others than it is to advocate for ourselves. What has EGR meant to you in your personal life and the way that you can live life now versus what it used to be like?
Oh, I was slipping between the ACC Ministry of Health kind of gaps, like many people do, because ACC makes one determination. Ministry of Health goes, oh, well, ACC's already looked at you, so you're their problem. So for me, when I had that breakdown, I was really fortunate to be able to access the, what's it called? I'm having a total.
Is that like the Green Star?
It's immediate resourcing. That's what it's called, immediate resourcing. Through Mana Whaikaha, and that gave me immediate access to some home help around the house, somebody to help us clean up around the outsides. I was able to use my connector to help sort out some of the relationships that weren't going so well at the DHB, so I could actually get things like my MRI done, which then turned into a more formal diagnosis around what was going on with my back and my legs, which then gave me more access to roll onto a personal budget with, because we had a better idea of what we were dealing with. And for me, that's been absolutely life-changing. I'd had several rounds of 6 weeks of physio for getting up and walking again. So you just start to see progress, and then your physio would stop, and there wouldn't be any follow-up. So for me, being able to have a personal budget where I can access a long-term rehab plan has been an absolute game changer. Being able to have somebody to come in and vacuum and clean the bathroom, it doesn't sound like much for some people, but for me, it's absolutely huge. Trying to crouch down and clean a bath just wrecks my back. Same with changing the bed. My partner has chronic fatigue syndrome, so a lot of people were like, oh, well, why don't you rely on that natural relationship? Because she's my partner, I love her, and she's got her own stuff going on. She shouldn't need to be taking care of me, and vice versa. And that's one of the inequities that I really struggle with, is chronic long-term chronic health conditions not currently being considered. But for me, it's been an absolute game changer, and by default, my partner MJ. I've been able to access a personal assistant this year when I've been away to speak at a couple of conferences, and just having someone there to do all the little bits of running around, like grabbing your bag off the carousel, organising the taxi, grabbing your lunch off the table, so I'm not wobbling between heaps of people. Having someone I can say, hey, do you mind taking my assistant's dog Raven out to that patch of grass over there for me? All those little things. I could go on and on and on about how much life's improved with enabling good lives.
It's life-changing to have just someone keeping an eye out for you or doing those extra things that you may not otherwise be able to have the capacity to do. So you touched base...
And grooming Raven is part of my personal budget. Cool. So that means I don't have to try and bath a dog every 6 weeks.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You touched on something just now where the rehab plan, as we so often know, stops at 6 weeks. And then you space it out to you get to go once a month or whatever. I know EGL's changed a lot of that for you. And I know that you've made some really ginormous, incredible progress and stakes, goals and achievements in this space. Do you want to tell me about that?
So Kylie, just how about you describe first when you met me, like physically?
When I met you physically, you were using your crutches.
Yep.
And you were really struggling to get around anywhere, really. You weren't walking far and your legs were really sore. and everything was a struggle. And to see you where you are today is like, it's kind of hard to believe. It's pinch me moment stuff. And I think
It's
it
pinch.
inspires hope in others to see how far you've come, that that what's possible, I guess, like, and to
Yeah.
not box yourself.
So through enabling good lives and using the principles, I was able to talk to my orthotist to get a flash ankle foot orthotic that I'd seen used by other adaptive outdoor recreation people overseas. So that was key. And then the rehab plan, which started me back at, hey, can you wiggle your toes? Still a bit iffy on one foot, but hey, I've got messed up nervous system. We're never going to be perfect. Um, and so during October 2023, I did 33.3 kilometers of events, one half marathon in Christchurch, which was the Four Paws Marathon, and then I did the 11 Ks across the Auckland Harbour Bridge as part of the Auckland Marathon at the end of October as part of the Achilles team.
33 kilometers.
And that's just events. That's not all the training and the rehab sessions and the flexibility.
So how did you get there?
Prioritized my own well-being first and foremost. So when I started back at Enabling Good Lives, I had some non-negotiables. And sometimes I get a bit slack about them being non-negotiables these days. But that was my Tuesdays and my Friday mornings are mine, and I go to rehab. It was just a non-negotiable. And I still try and keep my Tuesday and Friday mornings free if possible, so I can make it to my rehab sessions. How else do I do it? Having a team that believed in me, but also had the specialist skills. Because I'm a bit of a sports junkie and a bit of an outdoors junkie, I just kind of got out there and did it anyway. So what had happened physiologically was I overdeveloped a whole lot of my major muscle groups, but I didn't have a lot of the stability group muscle groupings going on. So we had to backtrack to actually teach those stabilizing muscles how to work again. So that's been part of it. Having those little bite-sized goals. I mean, it just started with, can I walk to the light post with one crutch instead of two? Can I walk my assistant's dog, around the block? Yeah. So it's been hard work. I won't say it's been easy. I'm sure my rehab team will tell you that I'm not always very happy with them, but I love them to bits. And that's been the other part, is the relationship there. I've known my trainer for a long time through other communities. And we went and did a mission in the Manawatu Gorge for International Day of Disabled People. I studied with the owner of the practice as well when we were doing adult teaching certificates together. And they kind of carry that friend vibe to everybody that's in the rehab clinic, which is really cool as well.
So that's a part of your week, but it's a very small part of your week. Antz is a very busy person that holds a lot of hats and navigates a lot of spaces. I know you have a huge heart and a passion for youth, for outdoor education, and you've been doing a lot of work in the abuse prevention space. One of the things I'd love to touch on as well, and you've touched on it briefly, but is what you'd love to be able to talk about today and share with others. One of the things that's come up a lot is the whole thing of having to look after yourself, protect yourself, but also what people don't see behind closed doors. We see this projected image, but people don't see the cost often behind the scenes, and what it genuinely costs to do what people in these spaces do.
So the 15 hours a week rehab, they don't see. You just see me crossing the finish lines. There's the sleepless nights, the muscle spasms, the bladder bowel issues, And then if you chuck travel on top of that, there's all the running around that travel takes, the having to turn up a full hour instead of just half an hour before your flight, because you've got a dog in tow. To me, it doesn't make sense. She's 28 kilos of dog. Just put her in next to me.
And then those
trying
moments.
to find somewhere to toilet my assistant's dog. You've flown in and out of Auckland Airport, Kylie, I'm assuming. There's just absolutely nowhere, same as Wellington. Christchurch is great. I've got this great grass patch straight out the front. And it's the little things. Sometimes, if my bladder's telling me I need to pee, and then you got to go and find the key for the disabled toilet. I don't want the toilet disabled. I want an accessible toilet. If the toilet's disabled, it's less use than I am.
Yeah, because you often can't hold on as long or far. Also, it takes you longer to get somewhere. It takes you longer to leave. There's something we don't talk about a lot as well, and I've touched on it briefly.
The emotional cost of this stuff,
which is we often talk about work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
We don't talk about work-life and disability. The minute you add disability, you cut a third of your capacity out already, because disability costs and it takes time. There are those days where we can't turn up and we can't do it, and you can't push through, and you need your community and your people there behind you.
100%. And for me, having been able to do stuff virtually has been an absolute godsend. It always strikes me and really demonstrates to me how disability is a social construct, because when we disabled the whole community by going, oi, you're all in lockdown, all of a sudden, these reasonable accommodations that disabled people had been asking for like decades were suddenly made available. Yeah.
And now they're being repealed.
I know. And it drives me nuts. Because, another colleague of mine, it takes her 2 flights just to get to Auckland for a hui. And when you add disability on top of that with the hour before and the do they have to check your batteries in your wheelchair? Do they have to check this on my dog? Do I need to take off gear to get her through the metal detector? Are my crutches in my other bag going to set something off when they x-ray it? All those little anxieties. Are my meds going to make it to where I'm going? Is my medical equipment going to get there? Am I going to have a hassle with somebody trying to exclude me because of my assistant's dog? All those little things that happen with work stuff that quite often employers don't even think to even put on their radar for accessible, reasonable accommodations.
So how do you do what you do?
How do I do what I do? Well, I get pretty direct with what I need for reasonable accommodations these days. People always ask me why I request a hotel room within a 1 block walk of a piece of grass. I have an assistant's dog. To me, it's not that hard to put 1 and 2 together on that one. I get quite specific. So I think one of the things is know yourself, know what you need. And if you don't tell them what you need, they're not going to be able to actually give you what you need. So you're probably not going to get what you need, and everybody's just going to get frustrated. So if you're upfront about what you need right at the get-go, it's far easier to have a good relationship and actually have conversations around what you need and why, rather than just saying, hey, this is how it is. I guess that's one of my little pearls of wisdom. And don't be afraid to go, you know what? No, I can't do that. And that's been a really hard one for me to learn, because for me, can and can't is more about, do you have the skills to be able to do it? And yeah, sure, I've got the skills, but do I have the time to do it has been the big one. And learning how to best manage my time to make sure I stay well.
And if you've said yes to something, that grapple. Like, I feel like a lot of the time we fight to prove ourselves. We don't have to prove ourselves, we just have to be. But I struggle, if I've said yes to something, to not push myself to the other end of the commitment because I've said yes, so I'm going to do it regardless. To come hell or high water, what that costs me, I've said yes, so that's end of the line. Not always to my detriment, not always to my betterment, often to my detriment, and learning that it's okay to say, actually, I'm not well today. I need to step out of this meeting. And more often than not, people are like, yeah, of course. Like, but
You
that's
look like
been
crap,
news to me.
what I've had. You know? I've said, hey, look, I got to go home to people, and they're like, yeah, no kidding, you look like.
And having grace for one another, right? Being able to be like, mate, I have space for you. We got you. And I think the cool thing for me in the relationships is having each other's back and being a safe person to say, I've got you, I'm in your corner, and having those I'm going to be real conversations. Or, Ants, how do you navigate this? Because I don't know. Or, Kylie, how did you navigate this? Because I need help. Yeah.
Well, and, you know, because we're disabled people, we have so many clinicians and connectors and this person and that person. You know what it's like, particularly if you've got a lot of medical stuff going on as well. They've all got their own perceptions, their own biases, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes you just need to download to another disabled person who goes, you know what, mate? Sometimes it's shit and I get it. Or sometimes you're doing really well. It's shit, but keep it up. Or it's okay to give yourself a break. I think I've told you that before, Kylie.
You have, yes. We've had many of these conversations over time, I think.
Yeah, and I think as my, so I've been recently appointed to the new Disability Abuse Prevention and Response team. So with that type of work, I'm going to have to be really mindful of making sure I do keep those boundaries in place, particularly because it's the type of work that there will never be no work. Unfortunately, there will be a lot of work for us moving forward within the abuse prevention and response space. I'm hoping the Commission brings light, the Royal Commission report brings light to some of the horrendous things that our people have been subject to.
In our disability community, and it's ongoing and it's now. And I don't think outside of that's not news to disabled people.
No, not at all.
Heck, is it news to non-disabled people?
Yeah.
They think it's a thing of the past and it doesn't happen. We've had conversations of some of the abuse I've experienced at the hands of others in the disability support world.
Yep.
In places of vulnerability, because I don't like the term vulnerable person. I rebel against it, but there is some real legitimate additional vulnerabilities because of my situation that does make me at risk of being taken advantage of.
It's not so much your vulnerabilities and risk. It's a risk that is forced upon you by others because they have recognized that there are elements to your social well-being that are not fully being fulfilled. So it's not your risk to carry. That's the first thing I would say. That's where people need to change their way of thinking around safeguarding. There is a difference between risk management around abuse, prevention, neglect, where that risk is forced upon you by others. It's not a risk you willingly take. Because when we talk about risk in outdoor recreation, it's around informed consent to take that risk. Same with medical stuff. You're supposed to make informed consent to take that risk. In an abuse situation, that risk is placed upon you by others.
That's quite a powerful shift in a language mindset and it gives you something to grab hold of, actually, and it takes it away as being always my fault and always on me.
Yep. It's not yours to carry. That's what I'd like to, I guess that's my gold nugget for the day, Kylie. And what our job is as community leaders and advocates is to encourage others to be able to take informed choices and risks around things in their own lives, to make informed choices about how to protect themselves from the risk that's placed on them by others. It's not about saying, hey, we're going to manage every single risk out there, because we're never going to be able to. But instead of just taking baths away from people because somebody had an accident, let's actually talk about how we ensure that people stay safe. Because again, that was a risk placed on that person
That
because there
someone
wasn't
didn't
enough
meet.
supervision. Yep. Because their support needs weren't being met.
So what would you share with other disabled persons or non-disabled persons listening to this today?
What would I have more open discussions? Yeah. Actually be open about your own limitations with people from time to time. I know you're often being told what your limitations are, but sometimes it's a really good idea to think about them, like, and boil it down. What do I need help with? What don't I need help with? What are some of the things that could make this safer for me, make it easier to use for me, that will build my relationship with other people? What are some of the things that I can make decisions about on a day-to-day basis? And sometimes I think, as disabled people, sometimes we're given a whole lot of shitty options to choose from. The power is in making the choice and having a choice to start with. So as much as possible, always ask the questions, can it be done another way?
It reminds me of you taking youth on camp.
And giving a blind man an axe.
Yeah. It also reminds me of my partner and the conversation you guys had about throwing disabled people in wheelchairs off abseiling cliffs or taking people in wheelchairs rock climbing. That was revolutionary to me. I had been told for so many years, can't happen, won't happen, you'll never do it again, it's not a thing. So I had been so limited in all the things I can't do, wouldn't do, can never do, should never do, like your tubes, your lines, your this, your that, your dislocations, your joints, that everyone was bubble wrapping me. One of the best things that happened, and I mean, my parents are phenomenal, and they will be like, you're going overseas, you've just had a really severe neck injury and you have no use of your left-hand side and you want to go overseas around the world? Like, mum sent me away knowing that she might not welcome me back home alive. That is mind-boggling to me. And mum literally put me on the plane knowing there was a chance I wouldn't come home. And she's had that conversation with me more recently because I'd partially dislocated my neck. And I'm about to get on a plane around the world. And I was in my power wheelchair and it laid flat, and we put all the things in place. But she had to say to me, she said, and it's not the first time that I've found myself in situations where mum's gone, you want to do that? Okay. Held her breath and turned around, kind of like, okay, I don't want to put limitations on her. I don't want to tell her no, and I don't want to limit her, but she had to hold her own self back to not limit my own determinations for myself, because she didn't want to put her own selfish expectations of keeping me around on the opportunity for what it would give me to give life. But a lot of the time in my world, that's not often the thing that I'm met with. And I've got an amazing community of people who are determined to make my life living in whatever I want to do. They help me achieve and do that. And an incredible partner now who has just exploded my entire world open.
What?
Yeah, right. You can't even compare. I was a prisoner in my home, mate.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, it was just before EGL as well. And there's just with the right supports behind you, with EGL behind you, with a job, you can do and achieve in the right supports and interventions with like my line, like I can live a really good life. And I think it's tribute to what's possible. But he's had to push back a lot on people, mate. And I mean, you've had to push back on people, and it's challenging those preconceptions and those ideas. I didn't know that I could go rock climbing again. He pulled me up the rope and allowed me to hold my hands, and then stood me up to a stand, and then did it again. Pulled, like, the two of them had the thing, and they pulled me up. But it was life changing for me. It changed all of these circumstances, and like I will always be grateful to a certain man in 2018 who said, "How hard could it be to take you overseas?" And people were like,
"Yeah, I know.
Are you sure you want to do that?" And he's like, "How hard can it be?"
Yeah.
And he's just like, "Oh my goodness, I did not know," but he wouldn't change it for the world. And it opened my whole world to what's out there and what's possible. It's literally one of the foundations that got me to where I am today. Without a doubt.
When I tell people that I take disabled people out doing adventure stuff, you can almost see the blood drain from their face sometimes. And people think I was probably making a crack earlier about handing a blind man an axe, but no, we were being serious.
No, you did.
I did.
Oh yeah, you did. Tell me about that. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so there's a hut in Aotearoa Forest Park just outside of Masterton. There's a gate. We managed to drive the bus up to it, unlock the gate, drive the bus up, unload, drive the bus back out. 28 bunks in the hut. We had the whole place to ourselves. It was the YAYs, so the young adult and youth from Mid Central Enabling Good Lives. So 28 bunker. The only able-bodied people on site were our 2 NZSL interpreters, 1 cook, and 1 support person. We had blind, deaf, neurodiverse, and wobbly walkers. And for some of those rangatahi, that was their first opportunity to kind of sleep near the bush, which was massive for them. But we turned up on a cold day. It was cold. We needed to get the fire going. I grabbed some stuff, got out my tomahawk so I could chop some kindling. Pete Allen, Matua Pete, fabulous man. He said, "Oh, Antz, you're about to chop some kindling." I went, yeah. He said, "Oh, I'll do that for you, Antz." I went, "Yeah, okay, here you go, Pete." Just as somebody else was going, "Oh, hey, Antz, can you?" So I wandered off, and I had to. I came back to see a blind man, with one hand on a piece of wood and another one with his hand up with the axe. I took a photo. I couldn't help myself. But, Pete knows what he's doing. He's been blind for a long time. I trust him. He knows his limitations. If it had been one of our young guys on the autism spectrum who'd never handled an axe before in his life, would have probably kind of gone, "Hey, have you done it? Oh, maybe not. Can we teach you how to do that a bit later on?"
Yeah.
And so I would have taken him back a few steps and talked to him about how we use an axe and how we use it safely and all those sorts of things. So some of it's about actually, let us make our own decisions about risk.
Isn't it so cool, though, what happens when we're given the position and the opportunity to fly? Like, it just so excites me, the movement of by disabled for disabled, getting behind and supporting and empowering one another and being able to lead and have charge and solution our own lives.
Yeah. And what was really, really spoke to me during this year was I've been involved with Duke of Edinburgh programs for many years and taking people on their journeys to get their adventure part of that complete. And this year we actually had a young woman with cystic fibrosis that came through the program. 10 years ago would never have happened. And so I was fortunate to be able to take that young woman out and do 2 or 3 days out in the back wops. And she had an absolute blast. We had a couple of, come on, you need to be a bit more I know what's going on. You actually just need to talk to me about it. But, for a 13-year-old to be out doing that kind of stuff, it made me realize that, what, sometimes the hard yards that I've done in this space have actually kind of got us somewhere.
But she doesn't want you to make the decision for her either, right?
No.
And she's scared of you making the decision for her. If she lets on about how things are or what's going on, the fear is you will make a decision for her.
Yeah, because that's what people have done for her entire life.
So it's you building trust. It's you building trust with her and her building trust with you to know that she's in control of her body and her situation and you're there to support her.
Yeah, and honestly, if I'm going, hey, are you all right? And she's going, yeah, I kind of got to trust her until she really falls over. I mean, that's what people do for me. Oh, how'd you end up on the ground there, Rex? Come on then.
Well, you've seen Mike do that with me. He's like, you dork, what are you doing down there? Like, are you going to get up? Oh, come on then, let me help you. He knows perfectly well I can't get up off the ground myself. So he scripts me up, picks me up, and we carry on again.
Did I tell you the difference between my assistance dogs? So as you know, I've changed assistance dogs since lockdown. And old Ben, he was like super enthusiastic about everything. So I'd fall over and he'd be right in my face going, oh, Mum, what's going on? What's going on? Can I help? Whereas Raven is like super laid back and super just in her own time. And I was at a hui and I'd been passing the microphone round and I decked it. And so I'm trying to whisper, Raven, Raven, crawl around to the end of the table, look around at her, and she's curled up on her mat where she heads when she's not doing stuff. And she opens one eye and just kind of looks at me. Oh, you do want me? And then does this big, huge, long stretch and yawn. And then just kind of, oh, hey, you want some help? So, yeah, I think I want one in the middle next time around. And I mean, assistance dogs have revolutionized my life as well. Having been allowed me to get out bush solo for the first time in 12 and a half years when I first got in. And, with the technology and having my dogs now, I'm pretty safe out there by myself. I've spent 20 years in the industry. I don't
you go bush on your own.
Yeah. I take a communication device so I can flick my partner a text message and say, hey, I'm still alive. This is where I'm at. And that also has a SOS function on it, which is also monitored by our local search and rescue guy. So it's okay, Kylie. I'm nice and safe while I'm out by myself. I've managed my own risk.
You have. You have. I've always been excited for you being able to see you get out in the bush on your own. Like, that was news for me.
Yeah.
It's not something that I had seen done.
Yeah, well, we've also done a lame leading the blind trip where I took a friend of mine with a visual impairment 9.2k into the Aotearoas for an overnight into a hut. We discovered when we got to Masterton that she'd left her white cane in Palmerston North. So I spent like 7 hours visually describing the entire track. It's great fun, but it's doable.
What's some of your favourite memories and stories and experiences? What's like some of the gold nuggets that you wish people knew out of these spaces?
That it's possible. My light bulb moment to get into the outdoors was watching a tetraplegic who had a C3 break in his spine, so he only had deltoids and traps. Deltoids and triceps. I watched him pull himself up 7 meters of rope. I'm a wobbly walker. I got no excuse. And that's kind of what started me on my outdoor rec adventures. Never give up. Always look for a solution, because there probably is one. Sometimes you've got to go outside your normal circle to find it, but always have a conversation with somebody. If you hear a nugget, go, follow that nugget, because you never know where it's going to lead.
How important is community?
hugely. Got to have your community behind you to be able to do anything.
How do you build community? How did you build community?
Take time. Too often we're on to the next meeting. We're on to the next hui. But we can't do whakawhanaungatanga if we don't take the time to actually build relationship and take time to get to know each other. Yeah. Take the time and honour the person that you're actually in front of. I guess would be my one real kernel of thought, because we're so often thinking about what's next.
Not actually taking time to see, or just say, I see you.
Yeah.
All those moments of silence.
Yeah, I hear you. And also, I think, build people up. There's no point bringing them down, because at the end of the day, you're doing yourself no favours. And by pulling other people down, we're not developing anybody or anything. And particularly with the change of government, as a disabled community, we have got to unite. We've all got to be saying, hey, we're 25% of the population of Aotearoa. We actually deserve the same rights as everybody else. Just because you haven't got your systems in order, about to get time to it. I'm starting to get to be known as the disabled woman that quotes Cabinet, because I keep telling people, hey, you know what? Cabinet signed you up to enabling good lives. You probably don't know that, but you're still obligated to at least try and meet these principles.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's making sure that we're intentional about, we're not a, swamp dwelling, bottom feeding, drain on society. People just haven't recognised the talents, the value and the skill within our community.
Alone we get so far, together we get so much further.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And he tangata, he tangata, he tangata.
The people.
I don't know whether I answered all your questions, Kylie.
Mate, it's just good to talk with you. There's so much to Antz, but there's so much to leadership and to journeying with people. And the podcast is about giving people the space and the platform to share, because there's so much richness to learn from one another, but we often don't get the platform to share and learn from one another. You only have 24 hours in the day to meet with people. So how do we learn collectively from one another? And the hope is that this podcast gives people a platform to share any rich gold that they would like to share from their journey. So it's an open platform for you.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to say is make use of the opportunities that you're given to use your voice as a disabled person. There will be more of them as we continue to push forward. Use those opportunities. There are democratic processes in place. Write submissions, get feisty, actually engage, because by not engaging, it's being complicit by omission. If we're not engaged, if we're not saying what we need, if we're not being the squeaky wheel, we continue to going to be the people that are ignored, the ones that and the disabled. Whereas we know that if we actually integrate things from planning and coders with disabled people, it works for pretty much anybody.
Accessible works for everyone.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our migrant services use easily read material, for instance. So often it's actually the disabled people that are giving tools to other people in a whole lot of ways. I mean, plastic straws were invented for disabled people to start with, and now they're taking them away, damn it.
Yeah, and then we have things like text messaging and audio readers, and people don't think of those as an accessible device.
Yeah.
But they were.
Yeah, exactly.
My friend, is there anything else that you would like to share today as an open platform? If there was something you could share or leave today as a thought, what would that be?
I think, having been working in that violence prevention space at this point, speak up. My one word is speak up. I guess 2 words. The reason I say that is I know that people are afraid of having their services reduced, their supports reduced, being treated differently by their support workers if you speak up. But the only way for us to eliminate the violence that goes untalked about within the disability community is for you and us to work together as survivors, as allies, and as a community. That's the only way we're going to be able to keep everybody a little bit safer, because it's not our risk and it's not our burden. It is society's burden. You know, keeping everybody safe is everybody's responsibility.
And it's not the truth. You can't lose your support funds for speaking up about things that have happened to you. It's not. I had that. Yeah. That was a line that was told to me for many years, but it's not the truth. They don't have that power over you to remove your funding. Support workers don't.
No. And speak up, because there are people who are working on the inside to ensure that your voices get heard. So yeah.
Where would someone
I can't talk to all of those survivors myself, but you know, I will. I'm working my hardest to ensure that change happens, because part of enabling good lives and living a good life is to be free from harm, neglect, abuse, and violence.
So if someone did want to speak up, where do they go to do that?
You can, so there's safeguarding at whaikaha.gov.nz would be my first point of call. Particularly if you don't want to follow, if you have a NASC, I suggest also following their complaints processes. But if you've gone down that pathway before, I would suggest getting directly in contact with Waikaha.
Amazing. Antz, my friend, it's a privilege and an honour to have you here today. Thank you. I have a whole lot of respect for you and the work that you do, and the waves that you create. No, in a really positive way. I think I have a lot of respect for what you've been able to do, and thank you for your time today.
No problem at all, Kylie. It's nice to be able to talk positively about some of the work that I do, because so often, you know, you say you were involved in disability abuse prevention, and you know, people don't want to talk to you about your job after that.
Yeah.
So thanks for the opportunity, My Life, My Voice. Loving the work that you're doing on a national level and here locally on the ground in Mid-Central with disabled people. I'm looking forward to running some workshops with My Life, My Voice coming up. So we will meet again, Kylie. Take care to all your viewers as well. So kia ora.
Thank you so much, team. Have a great day, and thank you again, Antz. See you. Bless you. Bye. My Rhythm, My Ride, a podcast by My Life, My Voice, available on YouTube and Spotify.